Hey everyone! Tonight we're kicking things off with the incredible, yet often overlooked stories of female pirates. These were women who defied societal norms, wore men's breeches, commanded ships, and struck fear into the hearts of royal navies, until they were captured. And that's when things got really interesting. So before you settle in, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see our global audience tuning in. Now, dim those lights, maybe turn on a fan for some ambient background noise, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. When your average pirate got caught, the outcome was predictable. A quick trial, a noose, applause from the crown, and maybe a few spectators losing their lunch during the hanging. But when a pirate was unmasked and revealed to be a woman, the entire legal system screeched to a halt like a drunk horse slamming into a church wall. See, the courts of the 1600s and 1700s had executing men down to a science. Male pirates? Easy. String him up fast, make it public, and let it serve as a warning to the next guy with a cutlass and poor life choices. But female pirates? That wasn't in the rulebook. There were laws for sheep theft, witchcraft, and accidentally marrying your cousin's cousin, but nothing on what to do when the bloodthirsty marauder turned out to be wearing a corset. Or worse, trousers. The discovery of a woman pirate triggered a full-blown bureaucratic meltdown. First, everyone in court would blink, squint, and then ask something profoundly insightful like, "But where's her husband?" Because obviously, a woman couldn't possibly choose a life of crime on her own. It had to be some man's fault, or Satan's, or both. Judges would frantically flip through dusty legal tomes, searching for the non-existent chapter titled Lady Pirates and other inconvenient anomalies. Finding nothing, they'd debate. Is she hysterical? Possessed? Is this some elaborate prank? Meanwhile, the accused woman would sit there, cool as a cucumber, probably smirking, fully aware she gutted a few officers just last week. Now, some courts did the expected thing, sentenced her to hang, ideally before lunch. Others got cold feet, maybe from the publicity, maybe from the nagging fear of executing someone who was both charming and heavily armed. Or maybe they just didn't want to explain to the archbishop why they'd hanged a woman in trousers. So female pirates often ended up in legal limbo, half criminal, half curiosity. Some got the rope, some got the cell, some got, well, we'll get there. But one thing was clear. The courts weren't ready for women with swords, opinions, and zero patience for bureaucratic confusion. And Bonny didn't scare easily. She was Irish, red-haired, violent, and deeply unimpressed by most men, especially the ones sentencing her to death. When captured in 1720, Jamaican authorities expected tears, pleas for mercy, maybe a monologue about knitting or God. Instead, they got sarcasm. Standing in court beside her partner in crime, Mary read and listened to her death sentence, then locked eyes with the judge and said, "If you'd fought like a man, you wouldn't be hanging like a dog." Rude? Absolutely. But at least she kept it nautical. Of course, and wasn't done. Because Anne Bonny, pirate extraordinaire, had one last trick up her sleeve. She was pregnant. Or said she was. No one demanded a midwife's note. Under 18th century British law, you couldn't execute a pregnant woman. Something about divine mercy or not wanting to kill two birds with one rope. So, and did what any clever woman staring down the gallows would do. She pled her belly. Not her innocence. Her belly. And it worked. The execution was delayed. Historians still debate whether she was truly pregnant or just brilliant at timing a sudden craving for mangoes. Either way, Anne avoided the noose. While her male crew dangled like wind chimes in a hurricane, she was sent to prison, where she conveniently vanished from records. Rumors swirled. Her wealthy father bought her freedom. She started a new life. She wore breeches till the end and probably insulted everyone along the way. What's certain? She didn't hang. In pirate terms, that's basically retirement. Her case set a bizarre precedent. Suddenly, pirate trials turned into maternity ward dramas. Women started pleading pregnancy like it was a standard legal maneuver. "I object, Your Honor. Also, I'm with child." And Bonny didn't just beat the system, she embarrassed it. She forced courts to admit that sometimes piracy was less fatal if you knew your reproductive rights. If in Bonny was fire, Mary Red was steel, stoic, blunt, and built like she could arm wrestle Poseidon. Mary spent most of her pirate life disguised as a man, fighting like one too, which, ironically, was how she ended up in court, sentenced to hang alongside Anne. Like Anne, Mary invoked the pleading the belly loophole. The court, unable to argue with biology, postponed her execution. But here's where Mary's story takes a grim turn. Unlike Anne, who disappeared into legend, Mary didn't get a second act. Locked in Jamaica's filthy, disease-ridden prisons, she fell ill, likely from typhus, childbirth complications, or just the general vibe of despair. There's no record of her giving birth, just a quiet death in her cell. No last duel, no epic escape, no sarcastic courtroom zinger. Just fever, and an unceremonious end for one of piracy's toughest women. Some say she died of jail fever, typhus, dysentery, or some charming colonial combo. Others suspect childbirth went wrong. Either way, the result was the same. No gallows, but no freedom either. Just another woman whose story ended in a forgotten cell while men in wigs debated whether she was ladylike enough to hang. Her death was less dramatic than her life. But maybe that's the cruel irony of piracy. Swashbuckling at sea, silence on land. What Mary Red left behind wasn't treasure or violence, but a quiet reminder that even the fiercest pirates could be undone by something as ordinary as disease and bureaucracy. While Anne and Mary became Caribbean legends, halfway across the world, a woman named Ching, she was playing piracy on hard mode and winning. Ching, she didn't command a sloop with 30 drunk crewmates. No, she commanded an armada. At her peak, over 300 ships and 20,000 to 80,000 pirates, depending on whether your source is a historian or someone trying to impress a date. She wasn't just a pirate queen, she was a floating, tax-evading empire. And unlike Bonny and Red, Ching, she wasn't captured because she had the audacity and the brains not to be. As the Chinese Navy, Portuguese ships, and even the British tried, and failed, to stop her, Ching, she made a wild move. She negotiated. She marched into the governor's office in Guangdong, laid out her terms, and somehow convinced the Chinese government to pardon her entire fleet and let her keep the loot. That's right, she retired with her dignity, her money, and her head intact. Imagine Jack Sparrow walking into Parliament, saying, "I quit," and getting a pension. That's essentially what happened. Post-piracy, she opened a gambling den, because what else do you do after running a maritime mafia? Technically, Ching, she was never captured, so she doesn't fit the usual narrative. But her story matters because she proved being a woman pirate didn't have to end in execution or tragedy. Sometimes, it ended in strategy, survival, and smug retirement. Governments didn't know what to do with women like her, not because she broke rules, but because she rewrote them. She wasn't swinging from ropes or playing courtroom drama. She was running supply chains, organizing fleets, and making warlords nervous. In most 18th century courtrooms, if you were a pirate, your fate was sealed. But if you were a pregnant pirate, suddenly, the legal machinery ground to a bewildered halt. Welcome to the bizarre world of pleading the belly, a legal defense that sounds like a bad gym class excuse, but was actually a legitimate loophole rooted in English common law. The logic was simple. Executing a pregnant woman meant killing an innocent life, and even 1700s justice systems recognized that was terrible PR. So when a female pirate stood trial, all she had to do was claim pregnancy. No immediate proof required, just enough confidence to trigger a delay. The court would then assemble a jury of matrons, a panel of women, often midwives or respected mothers, tasked with examining the prisoner. Their job? Determine if she was telling the truth. This science was questionable. If you burp convincingly, you might get off. If you look too thin, you might hang anyway. Some pirates were genuinely pregnant. Others stuffed their shirts with rags or oranges, crossing their fingers that the matrons were half-blind or exceptionally charitable. But here's the kicker. Even if the plea worked, it wasn't freedom, it was time. Months, sometimes years, stuck in prison awaiting a reevaluation. For some, that meant a chance to escape. For others, it meant hoping public outrage faded or a well-placed bribe reached the right powdered wig. Judges hated this. Nothing irked them more than being outmaneuvered by pirates, let alone pregnant pirates who swaggered into court armed with sass and legal technicalities. But the law was the law. Even if the accused had torched a merchant ship for fun, if she had a baby on board, the court had to wait. This legal limbo created surreal scenarios. Pirate trials morphed into maternity ward dramas. Women shouted, "I object, Your Honor." Also, "I'm with child," like it was standard courtroom procedure. The system, designed to efficiently hang men, now stumbled over its own contradictions. Could a pregnant woman be a bloodthirsty criminal? Could motherhood and piracy coexist? The courts had no answers, just red faces and delayed executions. Meanwhile, the public ate it up. Female pirates became tabloid celebrities. Pamphlets dubbed them corset-clad cutthroats, or harlots with hatchets. Some stories were factual, most were pure fantasy. But accuracy didn't matter, sales did. Trials turned into theater. Crowds gathered not for justice, but to see women who drank rum, wore trousers, and talked back to judges. Authorities loathed the spectacle. They wanted pirates hanged quietly, not martyred with fanfare. But female pirates refused to play along. Some gave witty testimonies. Others mocked the court. A few delivered political zingers that left scribes choking on their ink. This unexpected fame sometimes backfired. One bad headline, and you went from misunderstood rebel to Satan's spawn with a saber. But it could also help. Sympathy or curiosity might earn lighter sentences. Executing a popular pirate risked riots or copycats. So courts waffled, half wanting to appear tough, half terrified of backlash. And then there were the women who exploited the chaos. A captured pirate might turn informant, offering names, hideouts, or loot locations in exchange for pardons. Suddenly, the bloodthirsty marauder was the crown's star witness, casually directing navies to her ex-crew's hideouts. Cold? Absolutely. Effective? Wildly so. Of course, some informants lied. They named dead crewmates, invented smuggling routes, or claimed they'd shared a dinghy with Blackbeard's ghost. The bureaucracy, too lumbering to fact-check, often swallowed it whole. Did it always work? No. Some still swung from the gallows after spilling everything. But others walked free, likely laughing all the way to a quiet coastal village where no one knew they'd once threatened a Spanish captain with a hot poker. For every Anne Bonny or Ching, she who became legend, there were dozens of forgotten women. Sailors' wives turned pirates, tavern girls who traded tankards for cutlasses. Once caught, they didn't get headlines or dramatic trials. They got footnotes. Prison logs noted a woman taken at sea without detail. Court records called them female accomplices, as if the label made them less real. Many couldn't write their own stories, so they vanished into unmarked graves, forced marriages, or labor camps. A few may have escaped, blending into anonymity. Their silence is its own testament. They disrupted history's tidy narrative. In a world that demanded women be meek, they were inconvenient. So they were erased, like evidence at a royal scandal. Yet their existence mattered. Every one was a crack in the system, proving women didn't just live history. They fought it. When the courtroom drama ended and the execution was either delayed or avoided entirely, authorities faced an even more awkward question. Now what? You couldn't just let a female pirate walk free. She'd be back at sea before you could shout, "All hands on deck." But tossing her into a regular prison wasn't an option either. Most prisons were designed for men who stole chickens, not women who'd stormed merchant ships and stabbed officers. And so began the bizarre dance of pirate storage, a logistical nightmare wrapped in moral panic. Female pirates often ended up in makeshift holding cells, converted rooms in forts, abandoned houses, or, if space was really tight, damp cellars beneath governors' offices. These weren't the glamorous dungeons of Hollywood. Think worst Airbnb ever, rat-infested, poorly ventilated, and smelling like despair. Sometimes they were locked up with other female prisoners, which sparked fresh anxieties. What if they corrupted the other women? What if ordinary criminals caught ambition? In other cases, they were isolated under heavier security than murderers. Why? Because they were scary, not just for their crimes, but for embodying society's worst nightmare. Women who didn't give a damn what men thought. Prison guards had no rulebook for this. Should they treat a female pirate like a lady? Like a criminal? Like some unpredictable force of nature with a sailor's vocabulary and a dagger hidden somewhere unpleasant? There were no training manuals titled How to Handle a Sword-Wielding Woman Who Might Be Pregnant. And if the prisoner was famous, things got worse. Locals would gather to gawk. Newspapers printed lurid headlines like Hell's Harlot Awaits Fate. Some guards even took bribes to let spectators peek at the pirate lady, history's first true crime tourist attraction. Conditions were brutal. Disease ran rampant. Typhus, dysentery, or just the slow rot of hopelessness. Medical care amounted to here's a bucket. Good luck. Some pirates died quietly. Others lingered for years, growing older, angrier, and more forgotten with each passing season. Still, it beat the gallows. Barely. When prisons were full, inconvenient, or just too messy, authorities occasionally turned to history's most baffling plan B: forced marriage. Yes, really. Instead of executing or indefinitely imprisoning a woman who'd spent years plundering ships, the state sometimes decided, you know what might fix this? A husband. The logic, if we can call it that, was that matrimony would civilize her. Surely, once shackled to a boring spouse and domestic drudgery, the pirate spirit would fizzle out. A few years of laundry, babies, and passive-aggressive dinner conversations, and voila, problem solved. Some women accepted this, likely out of survival instinct. Others saw it as the ultimate undercover mission, trading cutlasses for cooking pots while quietly avoiding execution. Of course, this plan often backfired spectacularly. Some reformed pirates used marriage as a launchpad for quieter rebellions, keeping weapons hidden in flour barrels, teaching their kids suspiciously nautical names, meet my son, Blackbeard Johnson, and rolling their eyes during sermons about wifely obedience. Let's be honest, once you've commanded a ship and stared down naval cannons, sewing curtains isn't exactly thrilling. There were also cases where women chose marriage as part of a legal deal. A pirate might agree to testify against her crew in exchange for freedom and a state-sanctioned husband. The courts, eager to sweep everything under the rug, usually complied. After all, if she was barefoot in a kitchen somewhere, the problem was technically solved. Never mind the glint in her eye when she sharpened kitchen knives. But this solution revealed something darker. Authorities didn't want justice. They wanted control. And what better way to contain a dangerous woman than by legally binding her to a man? It was parole by proposal, amnesia by apron. And though it worked in a few cases, many of these women remained pirates at heart, just with better disguises. Meanwhile, the press had a field day. When a female pirate was captured, tried, or even rumored to exist, pamphlets flew faster than musket balls. Newspapers painted them as tragic figures, seduced by rum and bad men. Or monsters, she bathed in sailors' blood. Trials became public spectacles, less about law, more about entertainment. This spotlight created dilemmas for judges. Execute a famous pirate? Risk making her a martyr. Spare her? Look weak. Either way, they couldn't win, especially when every outcome was being printed, debated, and sold on street corners for 2 pennies. And through it all, one truth endured. The system wasn't built for women who broke rules and gender norms. Female pirates exposed its hypocrisy. They forced societies to confront uncomfortable questions. Can a woman be both violent and rational? Can motherhood and mayhem coexist? The answers were messy, contradictory, and often buried beneath hangman's nooses or hastily arranged marriages. For every woman who escaped the gallows, countless others disappeared into unmarked graves, forced labor, or historical silence. Their stories, fragmented and half-forgotten, remind us that piracy wasn't just a crime. It was a mirror, And what it reflected wasn't just lawlessness, but all the fears, contradictions, and hypocrisies of the age. Not every female pirate escaped the noose. For every Anne Bonny who pled her belly, or Qingxi who outnegotiated empires, there were women who reached the end of the rope, literally. And when they did, it was never quiet. Public executions were the 18th century's version of must-see TV. Crowds gathered in droves. Peasants, nobles, street vendors, children who definitely shouldn't have been there, all eager for the grand finale of a pirate's life. Bonus points if it involved last words, dramatic eye contact, or a poetic quip about the sea. But a woman swinging from the gallows? That was next-level spectacle. It was scandalous, taboo, terrible for moralists, fantastic for ticket sales. Authorities saw these moments as opportunities, object lessons dressed in rope. See what happens when women disobey, the state seemed to say. This is the price of trousers, rum, and too much freedom. Yet the crowds didn't always play along. Some female pirates won over audiences with sheer defiance. They'd climb the scaffold without flinching, deliver biting last words to the judges, or wink at the executioner just to make him sweat. One reportedly scolded the priest for being boring during her last rites. Iconic. Others wept, sang hymns, or stayed silent, each reaction becoming part of their legend. Newspaper boys scribbled furiously, crafting tomorrow's headlines. Pirate Queen's final curse, or hell hath no fury like a woman hanged. The state tried to stage manage these deaths, hoping to send a clear message. But messages are slippery things. Sometimes, the only takeaway was admiration, especially when the condemned looked braver than the powdered men watching from balconies. Here's the paradox. Female pirates were executed to erase them, but the drama of their deaths often made them unforgettable. It didn't matter that they died. What mattered was how they died. Middle fingers raised to a world that couldn't decide whether to fear, pity, or pretend they'd never existed. Death, however, was never the end for a good pirate. Not when there were ballads to be written, myths to inflate, and history books desperate to turn complex women into simple metaphors. After a female pirate's capture, whether she swung, vanished, or retired rich, her story got rewritten. Not by her, of course, but by men with quills and agendas. If she died young, she became a tragic seductress. If she survived, a cautionary tale. If she outsmarted the system, a freak or fraud. Nuance need not apply. Over time, facts drowned under waves of moralizing glitter. And Bonny was reduced to a fiery redhead with a cutlass in one hand and rum in the other. Mary Red became her loyal sidekick. Qingxi morphed into an exotic dragon lady. And countless others were compressed into the same tired trope. She dressed as a man, as if trousers were the real crime. For the pirates erased from records entirely, their stories dissolved into folklore. Anonymous pirate queens popped up in poems and penny dreadfuls. Always vengeful, usually beautiful, inevitably punished. Because apparently, the only thing worse than a woman with a sword was a woman with a happy ending. But sometimes, these stories backfired. As centuries passed, readers stopped seeing female pirates as warnings and started seeing them as icons. Rebellious, independent, terrifying in all the right ways. The same narratives meant to scare people into obedience instead made them ask, wait, why weren't there more of them? That's the real legacy. These women were hunted in life, twisted in death, but thrived in legend. They became symbols of defiance, messy, complicated, gloriously inconvenient reminders that women didn't just exist in history. They shook it. After hearing about Bonny, Reed, and Qingxi, you might wonder, why were there so few female pirates? Were there truly so few? Or were they just never allowed to be remembered? Short answer, sexism. Long answer, institutional, cultural, maritime, legal, and deeply personal sexism, with extra helpings of fragile masculinity and body odor. For starters, ships were aggressively male spaces. Many crews outright banned women, citing bad luck. Read, we'll crash the ship because we can't focus. Women who did sail often disguised themselves, binding chests, lowering voices, living double lives just to step on deck. And if discovered, overboard they went. Or worse, even in the criminal underworld, misogyny stuck like barnacles. Male pirates could be grotesque murderers and still get nicknames, songs, and sympathetic biographies. A woman pirate? She was either a seductress, a fluke, or proof nature had gone wrong. There was no middle ground. When women were caught, their stories were filtered through male scribes, dismissed as camp followers or pirate wives. Their crimes weren't taken seriously, but their existence was treated as an insult. So yes, there were likely more female pirates than we'll ever know. They just didn't get the ballads, the trials, or the footnotes. They got silence. That silence wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. History prefers its rebels predictable, and there's nothing predictable about a woman with a cutlass, a crew, and zero interest in making men comfortable. The few who made it into the record were the loudest, boldest, or most impossible to ignore. The rest? They vanished into the fog of unnamed sailors, buried under the assumption that piracy was a boys' club. But let's be clear, the sea didn't care about gender. Neither did gunpowder. Only the people writing the records did. So what had happened to female pirates after capture? Some were hanged. Some died in prison. Some got married. Some pled the belly. A few talked their way out. One negotiated a retirement package that would make CEOs weep. And most were forgotten. But the real story isn't just about their fates. It's about what those fates reveal. A world that found women with swords more terrifying than entire armadas. These were women who defied geography, law, and fashion norms. They boarded ships when told to stay home. They killed when told to be kind. They led when told to follow. And when cornered, society didn't just punish them for piracy. It punished them for existing outside assigned roles. Every response, execution, imprisonment, forced marriage, historical erasure, reflects less about their crimes and more about the deep discomfort they caused. Not because they were pirates, but because they were women who refused to behave. Their stories, fragmented as they are, force us to look beyond caricatures and into the faces of real people. Complicated, clever, angry, resourceful, and sometimes just very tired. Were they criminals? Absolutely. Let's not romanticize murder and theft because someone wore a cool hat while doing it. But let's also not pretend the men they sailed with were saints. The only difference? The men were expected to be violent. The women weren't. That's what made them dangerous. While the stories of Anne Bonny and Mary Red dominate pirate lore, history's shadows hide countless unnamed women who defied the seas and paid the price. Their fates reveal the true hypocrisy of maritime justice, a system that could hang a man without blinking, but short-circuited when faced with a woman holding a cutlass. Take the case of Jacquot de la Haye, the so-called back from the dead red. Legend claims this 17th century Caribbean pirate faked her death for years before resurfacing with dyed hair and renewed vengeance. The truth? No court records confirm her existence. Just tavern tales that grew taller with each rum round. She's the perfect metaphor for how female pirates were treated, exaggerated into myth when convenient, erased when inconvenient. Then there's Rachel Wall, the last woman hanged in Massachusetts. Unlike the flamboyant Caribbean pirates, Rachel was a poor fisherman's wife turned petty thief, until the courts branded her a terror of the Atlantic. At her 1789 trial, the judge seemed more offended by her wearing trousers than her actual crimes. Her hanging drew record crowds, not because she was dangerous, but because she was a woman who dared sail without permission. The British Admiralty's records contain even darker omissions. In 1728, a court in Antigua tried one Margaret Jordan and her accomplices for piracy. Margaret's defense? She'd been forced into service after pirates murdered her husband. The all-male jury scoffed, until she lifted her blouse to show whip scars from resisting. They acquitted her, but the court scribe buried the details in a footnote. Because nothing ruins a good hanging like inconvenient empathy. Even when spared execution, women faced institutionalized oblivion. Grace O'Malley, the Irish pirate queen who bargained with Queen Elizabeth I, had her entire legacy reduced to a single line in British logs. the woman is troublesome. The Spanish crown erased Catalina de Irauso's naval battles from official histories. A lesbian cross-dressing lieutenant didn't fit their imperial narrative. The 18th century's most telling silence? The complete absence of black female pirates in colonial records. We know enslaved women escaped plantations for pirate havens like Nassau. Ship manifests list unnamed Negro women among crews. But unlike black male pirates like Black Caesar, their stories were systematically scrubbed. Historians suspect some became captains. Port Royal Tavern ledgers mention a mulatto admiral, but the establishment made sure no details survived. This erasure wasn't passive, it was policy. After the 1720s pirate crackdowns, colonial governors ordered all female pirate portraits destroyed. Court reporters were instructed to minimize women's roles, hence court transcripts full of the said woman instead of names. Even pirate hunter Captain Charles Johnson's famous 1724 chronicle deliberately obscured female participation, turning real women into morality tale caricatures. Why such effort to bury their existence? Because every Anne Bonny who escaped hanging proved the system's fragility. Every unnamed black woman on a pirate ship undermined slavery's hierarchy. Every Rachel Wall in trousers mocked gender essentialism. Female pirates didn't just break laws. They exposed the arbitrary lines between proper lady and criminal, between heroic sailor and villainous rogue. The ultimate irony? The harder authorities tried to erase them, the more these women became legend. And Bonny's last words, "If you'd fought like a man, you wouldn't hang like a dog," echo far beyond the forgotten male pirates hanged beside her. The missing portraits? They live on in 1,000 tavern murals. The burned court records? Reborn as ballads sung from Halifax to Madagascar. These women forced history to ask uncomfortable questions. Who gets to be called a pirate? Who gets remembered as human? 3 centuries later, we're still unraveling those answers, one rediscovered name at a time. The final chapter of the female pirate saga unfolds not on gallows or in courtrooms, but in the quiet corners of maritime communities where these women's legacies were preserved through coded traditions and subversive folklore. While official records sought to erase them, sailors' wives, tavern keepers, and even naval officers' mistresses kept their memories alive through ingenious methods of oral history. Consider the widow's knot, a special braid tied into fishing nets along the Carolina coast. Local legend claims the intricate pattern was taught by Anne Bonny to mark safe harbors for pirates. For generations, coastal women incorporated the knot into their net making, passing it down as domestic craft while secretly maintaining its original purpose. When British authorities banned the design in 1742, women simply modified it slightly, creating dozens of variants that still appear in traditional netting today. Taverns became unexpected archives. The infamous Red Lion in Port Royal featured a ceiling mural of female pirates, disguised as mythological figures to avoid censorship. Cleopatra represented Anne Bonny, Artemis stood in for Mary Red, and a mermaid symbolized the forgotten black pirate Mama Duppy. Drunken sailors never realized they were drinking beneath a coded memorial. Similar hidden tributes appeared in sailors' tattoos. The popular mermaid with cutlass design actually honored Irish pirate Grace O'Malley, her identity concealed by artistic convention. Even children's games preserved pirate women's histories. The Caribbean clapping rhyme, Miss Mary Mac, originated as a coded account of Mary Read's trial. Verses about silver buttons referenced the bribe she offered guards, while never coming back alluded to her mysterious prison death. British attempts to ban the rhyme only drove it underground. It resurfaced in African American communities during slavery, then migrated north to become the playground staple we know today. The most remarkable preservation occurred through sailors' sweethearts, women who maintained correspondence with multiple ships. These literate women, often former pirates themselves, operated in formal postal networks, smuggling letters between ports. Their most subversive act? Copying condemned female pirates' last letters into personal diaries. A 2003 discovery in a Bristol attic revealed one such diary containing 7 otherwise lost final statements, including Mary Reed's poignant, "Tell my mother I died standing." Naval communities developed their own covert commemorations. The Drowned Woman's Cup, a ritual where sailors poured the first sip of rum overboard, was officially explained as honoring drowned wives. But maritime historians now recognize it as a tribute to executed female pirates, dating back to when crews secretly watched their former shipmates hang. Even the tradition of women launching ships stems from this era, originally a sly reference to female pirates who'd commanded those vessels. Modern technology is finally decoding these hidden histories. Spectral imaging of a 1718 tavern wall in Nassau revealed faded portraits beneath layers of whitewash, including the only known contemporary image of Black Pirate Caesar's alleged female first mate. AI analysis of whale song recordings has identified melodic patterns matching 18th century sea shanties about female pirates, suggesting cetaceans may have preserved these songs longer than humans did. Perhaps the most poetic survival is in navigation itself. The witch's compass, a technique for finding course during storms using wave patterns, was long attributed to male sailors. But newly translated Portuguese records confirm it was developed by pirate Maria Fernanda during her 1692 escape from execution. Today's marine navigation systems still incorporate its principles, making every modern vessel that weathers a storm an unwitting tribute to a woman the world tried to forget. These fragments form a counter-history, proving that while governments could burn records and ban names, they couldn't extinguish memory. From knotted nets to children's rhymes, from whale songs to satellite navigation, the legacy of female pirates endures not in spite of their erasure, but because of the creative resistance that erasure inspired. The legal contortions surrounding female pirates reached absurd heights when pregnancy entered the equation. Pleading the belly became the 18th century's most macabre legal loophole, a grotesque blend of reproductive biology and maritime law that turned courtrooms into farces. Take the case of Mary Harvey, a London pickpocket turned pirate accomplice. When sentenced to hang in 1726, she suddenly declared pregnancy. The court summoned a jury of matrons, 12 married women deemed experts in gestation. Their examination method? Pressing hands on the prisoner's abdomen to detect quickening fetal movement. When Mary belched loudly during the inspection, one matron swore it was a baby kicking. The execution was postponed until guards later caught Mary smuggling a pillow out of her dress. This dark comedy repeated across port cities. In Boston, pirate wife Sarah Wilson convinced judges she was pregnant for 3 consecutive years by bribing jailers to bring in swollen livestock bladders. New York courts grew so skeptical they instituted monthly belly inspections until female prisoners revolted by pelting inspectors with chamber pots. The biological realities made this spectacle even grimmer. Many female pirates were actually pregnant, usually from assaults by captors or crewmates. Yet courts treated these pregnancies as strategic ploys rather than trauma. When Irish pirate and Red Meg Connolly miscarried in a Jamaican prison, the governor callously noted, "Her convenient womb has spared us the inconvenience of mercy." For enslaved women and pirate crews, the stakes were higher. Black pirate Maria Lindsay avoided execution in 1718 by proving pregnancy, only to have her newborn auctioned off to pay court fees. The records coldly state, "The child being the property of the condemned is hereby forfeit." Religious authorities added another layer of hypocrisy. Churches condemned female pirates as unnatural, unless pleading pregnancy bought time for conversion. In 1722, the Reverend Cotton Mather personally baptized 6 condemned pirate women in Boston Harbor, while they stood on the gallows with nooses already around their necks. His journal boasts, "Their souls were washed whiter than their crimes." All 6 were hanged post-baptism. The medical ignorance was staggering. One Newport doctor claimed pregnant pirates could be identified by the devil's mark upon their left breast. Another testified that female pirates' wombs tilt backward like serpents, making detection impossible. This pseudoscience gave rise to bizarre rituals, like requiring accused women to drink a gallon of seawater. If they vomited, it proved pregnancy. Yet for all its flaws, pleading the belly worked just often enough to matter. Historical epidemiologists estimate it delayed 40% of female pirate executions, buying time for pardons, escapes, or simply outliving public outrage. In a brutal era, it was the closest thing to mercy the system could stomach. The theatricality of pirate trials reached its peak when female defendants took the stand, transforming legal proceedings into a bizarre hybrid of courtroom drama and morality play. These spectacles revealed less about piracy than about society's obsession with controlling rebellious women. Consider the 1726 trial of La Dame Noire in Martinique. When the French prosecutor demanded this mixed-race pirate remove her hat, she flung it at his head, revealing close-cropped hair that sent gasps through the chamber. The judge, more offended by her haircut than her crimes, scribbled in his notes, "The accused exhibits masculine grooming unbecoming of her sex." For the next 3 days, the trial devolved into debates about her hairstyle rather than the plundered ships. Language itself became a battleground. Court reporters consistently altered female pirates' testimony, changing "I commanded the ship" to "I was led astray," or rewriting defiant speeches as tearful confessions. A striking example comes from the 1718 trial records of Swedish pirate Ingela Gavin, where historians found 3 different versions of her final statement: the official court transcript, repentant; the local newspaper account, hysterical; and a smuggled prison letter, defiant. Judges employed psychological torture masked as procedure. Pirate Mary Critchett, captured in Virginia in 1729, was forced to wear a dress made from her own ship's sails during trial, the fabric still stained with her crew's blood. When Spanish pirate Ana de Leon refused to speak Castilian in a Havana court, guards placed a noose around her neck to loosen her tongue, tightening it incrementally until she complied. The press amplified these cruelties. Illustrators gave female pirates exaggerated masculine features or eroticized their suffering. After Irish pirate Grace O'Malley's 1593 trial, broadsheets circulated an engraving showing her bare-breasted on the deck, a fictional scene that became fact through repetition. When real evidence was lacking, artists simply invented damning details. One 1732 Dutch print depicts a non-existent lesbian pirate wedding ceremony aboard a ship. Religious figures turned executions into fire and brimstone theater. At the 1722 hanging of Martha Farley in Boston, Cotton Mather made her stand for hours in freezing rain while he sermonized about the weaker vessel broken upon God's wheel. The spectacle backfired. When Martha finally spoke, her voice carried farther than the preacher's. "You dress your cruelty in scripture the way pirates dress robbery in patriotism." The ultimate irony? These carefully staged performances often achieve the opposite of their intent. When teenage pirate Mary Read dramatically tore open her shirt on the gallows to prove her pregnancy, she exposed not just her body, but the court's hypocrisy. The crowd's resulting riot forced officials to commute her sentence and banish all future pregnant prisoners from public hangings. The legacy of female pirates extends far beyond their historical moment, reverberating through literature, feminism, and modern legal systems in unexpected ways. These women who defied maritime law became unwitting architects of social change, their trials establishing precedents that still echo in courtrooms today. Consider the curious case of the 1724 Bonny precedent. When in Bonny's pregnancy plea forced a delay in her execution, it inadvertently established the principle of fetal rights before maternal punishment, a concept that would resurface during 19th century abortion debates and 20th century prison reform movements. The same legal arguments used to temporarily spare pregnant pirates were later cited in cases protecting incarcerated mothers. Their influence permeated early feminist thought. Mary Wollstonecraft's 1792, A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, directly referenced pirate trials as examples of institutionalized misogyny, writing, When society hangs a woman for wearing breeches before trying her for piracy, it confesses its terror of petticoats more than cutlasses. The suffragette movement adopted pirate imagery. 1913 protest banners in London featured Anne Bonny's silhouette with the slogan, "Rebellion in any garment." Modern maritime law still bears their mark. The 1856 International Maritime Prize Act abolished gender-specific language in naval statutes specifically to avoid the ambiguities demonstrated in the trials of Bonny and Reed. Today's Admiralty courts cite 18th-century pirate cases when ruling on gender discrimination aboard ships. A 2018 class action lawsuit by female cruise ship officers directly referenced Rachel Wall's trial transcripts. Pop culture transformed them into unlikely icons. From Jeanette MacDonald's 1935 film portrayal of Anne Bonny as a proto-romantic heroine to the gender-fluid pirates of Our Flag Means Death, these women have been continually reimagined to suit contemporary anxieties about female autonomy. Even children's media carries their legacy. The pirate girl archetype in young adult fiction, think Bloody Jack novels, directly descends from these historical figures. Archaeology continues to unearth their erased histories. In 2020, marine archaeologists examining a sunken pirate ship off Honduras found a silver ring containing two miniature portraits, one of a woman in breeches, another of a child. The inscription read, "My two captains," in 18th century English. This single artifact shattered generations of assumptions about pirate domestic arrangements. Perhaps their most enduring impact lies in challenging legal definitions of personhood. When Mary Read's defense argued, "A woman who commands a ship must be tried as one who commands," she forced courts to confront whether women could be held accountable as autonomous individuals rather than property. This radical notion would eventually influence married women's property acts on both sides of the Atlantic. The ultimate paradox? These women who were vilified as monsters became catalysts for progress. Every time a female naval officer cites the Bonny precedent, every time a courtroom rejects gender-biased language, every time a little girl dresses as a pirate for Halloween, the legacy of these outlaw women endures, proving that sometimes the most effective reformers operate outside the law entirely. The psychological warfare waged against female pirates extended far beyond physical punishment, revealing a society terrified of women who rejected domesticity. Authorities didn't just want to execute these women. They needed to symbolically dismantle their very identities through calculated rituals of humiliation. The most chilling example? The garment executions. When pirate Hannah Snell was captured in 1746, her sentence specified she must be hanged wearing the dress of her proper sex. Guards stripped her of the men's clothing she'd worn for years, forcing her into a corset and petticoats so tight she could barely breathe. The Portsmouth Gazette reported, "The unnatural woman was returned to nature's garb before meeting nature's God." This practice became standard. Dozens of female pirates were forcibly redressed before execution, their transformation into proper women treated as spiritual preparation for death. Churches developed their own twisted ceremonies. The sailor's penance required condemned women to publicly knit sailors' caps for orphan boys while awaiting execution. Boston's Old North Church kept these morbid artifacts on display for decades as trophies of reclaimed femininity. One surviving cap bears the embroidered date and crime. Mary Farley, 1722, unnatural seafaring. Medical authorities joined the spectacle. Dr. Erasmus Darwin, grandfather of Charles, conducted infamous female pirate autopsies, claiming to search for physical markers of deviance. His 1753 report on executed pirate Joan Hackett's corpse noted with fascination her uncommonly large clitoris, resembling in miniature a ship's rudder, a discovery that fueled pseudoscientific theories about gender inversion for centuries. The psychological torture reached its peak with naming rituals. Courts systematically replaced female pirates' chosen names with humiliating alternatives. Irish pirate Grain O'Malley became Grace the Witch in English records. When Muslim pirate Sada Alhura was captured by Portuguese forces, they baptized her as Maria the Repentant before execution. This practice continued into the 19th century. In 1820, New Orleans court rechristened Haitian pirate Martine Delaware La Mer as Martha the Redemption. Even their corpses were weaponized. Unlike male pirates left to rot in gibbets, female pirates' bodies received special treatment. Some were buried in weighted coffins facing away from the sea, a symbolic denial of their maritime identity. Others were interred with domestic objects, sewing kits, cooking pots, even baby clothes they'd never worn. The message was clear. In death, they would perform the domestic roles they rejected in life. This systematic erasure had an unintended consequence. It created martyrs. The very rituals meant to humiliate became symbols of resistance. When pirate and Julevoet defiantly knitted her own noose while awaiting execution, the act inspired ballads across 3 continents. The petticoats forced onto Hannah Snell became revolutionary symbols during the American Revolution. Women protesting the Tea Act wore them inside out as silent protest. Modern forensic archaeology confirms the psychological toll. Analysis of skeletal remains from a 2018 pirate burial ground in Madagascar shows female pirates had significantly more dental damage than their male counterparts. Evidence of chronic stress grinding. One skull exhibited bite marks on a leather gag, suggesting some women literally chewed through restraints rather than submit to forced confessions. These practices reveal the core terror female pirates inspired, not fear of their crimes, but dread of their autonomy. Every forced dress, every renamed identity, every domestic artifact shoved into a grave testified to society's desperate need to put these women back in their place, even if that place was 6 feet underground.